from Northern Chihuahua. Where's lots of cows? We'll hear your stories. Where's our super host? We're Dan on the mic. It will be a blast. Backstage pass. But you're the cat.
I get to go on a home visit today with one of our physical therapists, Danie Benjamin, and we are going to visit a young man who has multiple complexities and challenges. So we're going to step in to somebody else's home. I used to do some of that for evaluation purposes, especially in early learning, but I haven't done it for a long time. And what were you doing before ESD Land?
Before that, I worked at Dornbecker. And I was doing a little bit of everything, like the inpatient, outpatient, and also in the NICU. So it was kind of all over the place. I never felt like I had enough time or enough resources to really do what I wanted to do with my patients. And then with this job, I feel like I have the flexibility and the resources to just do what I need to do for students. I have the time to follow up with medical providers or collaborate with other team members, where in the hospital, it's just, it's just, you got to keep moving through things, and there's just so much pressure to keep your productivity up and see, as many patients as you can. Whereas I feel like with doing home visits, I have the ability to schedule so that I can have some time in between visits. It doesn't feel like I have to cut them off. I can spend the time it takes with each family, which is really nice.
That's beautiful.
My worth as an employee doesn't go back to how much I'm billing and how much money I'm making for our program. We'll see what happens today. Every home visit is different, and so we'll see how it goes today.
I'm pretty excited. Also, it's like a humbling experience to go into somebody else's home, and I feel really fortunate that I get to do this. So we are leaving, home visit for a little guy.
I think that's a very kind of typical visit with this family. Definitely try to come in with a plan and some ideas on things that are going to work on the skills that child needs or address the family's goals. But then it's ultimately kind of up to the parents and the child.
What I saw, first of all, the mom is super appreciative and was grateful that, we even have the service, because she was like, I don't have to leave and go somewhere else. And she has all these appointments, all week. She talked about being able to generalize stuff in her home. Right, that you were teaching that if she was in a clinic atmosphere or some other atmosphere, sometimes they don't have the stuff that you have there, and just that you're working in their context, and that makes a big difference for her. The little fella is working on some, really critical life moves, moving and tracking objects and communicate with his mom there. So yeah, I thought it was awesome.
As providers, we can come in with a different toy or a different way to use the toy and show them, a different skill that their child is able to do, or kind of highlight that communication piece where it was oh, he's pushing that one away. He's not interested in it. And he's telling us, right? He's making that choice.
Yeah.
And I think it's helpful for families to have that extra set of eyes to say oh, I see your child doing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
In early intervention, we're working on all areas of development. And I tend to have kids that have higher kind of medical complexity. And so it's not ever that we're just working on communication or ever just working on gross motor skills. It's everything. Yeah. So headed back to tech?
Headed back to tech.
Okay.
So what do you think are the next set of skills that you're going to really start pushing on?
Yeah, I think for him, it's really about access and communication. So for me, it's much more about how can I help him access the things that he needs to be able to access, positioning equipment that he's going to need down the line to help him to be able to access someday preschool and school. And then the communication piece.
You introduced a new switch, right?
Yeah.
You double switched. So there was moving from just having a single, off on want to a choice. How would you continue to introduce that, and where do you think could happen there, in the next couple of weeks per se?
Yeah, so with that, the first is a no error. It doesn't matter which one you choose, you're gonna get something that you like. They have something called a power link, which basically turns anything with a plug into a switch adapted object or activity. So they plugged in Christmas lights to the power link. And so what I was telling them to do is get a different color of lights on each, so he can really start to distinguish, this button does this and this button does this, kind of like what we did with the toys. Or in the case of powered mobility, potentially down the road, having a power wheelchair where he can use switches to make it go, make it stop, make it turn, whatever. So it's that idea of just kind of opening up the world to I can control things.
Right. I thought that was kind of a big move for you today. It seemed to me introducing this choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2 things happened when I came to this job and left kind of the medical model, is that I had my own kids and I started this job. Having come from the hospital, where you tell parents to oh, this is the exercises I want you to do at home, or this is how I want you to do it. And then having my own child and realizing,
that's going to be really hard.
That's going to be really hard. I've asked them to do 5 things. That's going to be really hard. So that realization, and then also just being, more kind of integrated into people's lives and seeing what their home life looks like and all the things that they're doing. So I try not to give a whole slew of things to do. Just pick one routine or one time in the day that you're going to work on this one skill, and kind of giving them a menu of options of things that they can try and work on. And I think families are also really good at being creative and coming up with their own ways to do things. And I'm learning from families all the time that we decided to do it this way and it worked a lot better. That's great. Yeah. So I think there's more collaboration with families too.
EI and ECSC and early learning in general are just to me, they're no-does. You've got to get more resources up front in kids' lives. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to pay for it on the back end. Yeah. That sounds really good. But then, there is a need in the community on all kinds of downstream effects.
I think one of the biggest needs we have is just spaces for early learning for our students. Inclusive preschool options. Because what we often find is that we've done all this great work in the birth to 3, doing home visits, having play groups, sometimes having some classes at our sites. But then when it comes to the kid turning 3, we just don't have the places to help families access those in the community. And for a lot of our families, once they've gotten to 3, if they've been in our program for those 3 years, they're parent coached. They have done all the parent coaching for 3 years. And so it's time to get those kids into spaces with their peers, because that's where they're going to learn. Yeah. And we just don't have enough places for our kids to go.
I often talk about how in Oregon, especially, there really is not an early learning system in the state. There are programs. Oftentimes they're disconnected. It's maybe you get access to something or maybe you don't. Yeah. And so then it becomes we're just doing treatment over here, but it's not connected to a system. And just watching, you guys do what you do on top of something that doesn't exist is interesting stuff, Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are rewarding about it. I think making those connections with families and seeing the parents and the caregivers grow in their capacity to help their children is a big one. So, for example, one of their big goals was we want to be comfortable moving him and lifting him. He'd been in the NICU for a really long time, and they just had never done a lot of holding of him. Now it's oh, it's no big deal. And I think also seeing them feel like they can do new things with him. So taking him to story time or bringing him to a play group 6 months ago, they wouldn't have felt comfortable with that. And so just seeing their capacity grow.
Being an educator I think it's the best thing to do with your life. It's made me really proud, to be part of an organization that does those kinds of things for families. And it also gets me pretty fired up about the funding challenges in the state around early learning and why it's so necessary to fight for these types of services that oftentimes are invisible in communities. This family also has like multiple medical appointments, and those are not flexible. Like they are either making that appointment or you're not getting that appointment. And you could just tell that the emotional safety that was formed in that relationship with Danie and the family, that's a very special thing. It's just a really humbling thing to go into people's homes. And it's also, I think, humbling to go and do that besides caring adults and educators who are trying to make a difference. Like kind of magic making for families, like just the flexibility that we're able to afford a family, that's a blessing in families' lives.